Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled Neighbor Homeowner Stories. In this video, a psycho neighbor left 3 abandoned car wrecks on my private property. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. So my neighbor is trouble, and that is honestly the best way that I can describe him. There's not a single time that I've interacted with this guy that did not end up in a fight or otherwise wishing that I didn't speak to him at all. So when I saw that his property was being put up for sale, I was happy to get rid of him and hopefully get a nice and normal neighbor instead. After years of fighting, I guess he wanted to do something to get back at me though, because the day he moved and I was at work, he decided to leave me a little bit of a present. Just for a note that the properties here are pretty big, about 3/4 of an acre each, so there's a lot of empty space that people can do things with. He would fix cars up, so his yard was usually filled with them, which was part of a lot of issues that my husband and I had with this guy. I guess that was why he decided to somehow get 3 total wrecks of a car on our property before just leaving. We had no idea where he moved to either, so we couldn't just call him up and tell him that he had to come and get his cars. This is where I can hear people already typing in the comments that I should just call and get the cars towed, but it's not as easy as some people make it out to be. If we had these cars loaded up and taken off for some scrap metal, we actually would be the ones to run the risk for a lawsuit by the old neighbor, since it was technically his property despite leaving it on our lawn. The next thing I can hear people shouting at me through the screen is to call the police and file a report. I did that, but unless the car is in danger of exploding or something, the police simply don't care and make it extremely low priority. If we were gonna get these off our land, we were going to need to figure out a way to prove that they were abandoned and be able to gain ownership of them. It means that we would have to pay, but honestly, I don't care if it means getting those things off of our lawn. Our kids could not even go out and play anymore, since the cars were too dangerous looking. The last thing I would want is one getting tetanus or something. We had the VIN numbers at least, which meant we were able to track the history of the car and learn a bit about the cars, which would be important later. We got a lawyer to help us make sure we did everything by the book and nothing was left up in the air about it. The first thing was to make a reasonable attempt to contact the previous owner about their cars and give them a chance to get them back. We managed to track him down and sent a letter that he confirmed to have signed for regarding getting the cars back. He had 2 months to respond or take any action, and he didn't do that. Then we had to file that along with our own statements to the city and wait for them to decide if we had done everything in our power to show that the cars had actually been abandoned. The fact that none could run and that the previous owner was not responding was actually enough for them to decide that we could gain ownership as it was left on our property. If it was left on the street, then it would have been the city's problem, and during all of this time we got curious about the cars and were looking into the models and makes and all the information from the VIN numbers. Well, what we found out was that one of the cars was actually a pretty rare classic car, and despite the bad shape it was in, people who restore for a living would pay some okay money to get their hands on it. While we were waiting, we met with a couple of people who looked at the car, and it was decided that if we ended up getting ownership, then he was willing to buy it for $10,000, since he could restore it and sell it for even more than that. So once every piece of paper was signed and finalized, we scraped the 2 cars, spending more on towing than we got in scrap value, but that 3rd car went to that guy and we walked about with $10,000 of basically free money. I don't know if the neighbor was watching us or waiting or something, but a few weeks later we got a notice that he was trying to sue us for getting rid of his cars, claiming that they were not abandoned and he was coming back for them. We then went to court and showed all of the paperwork, including the fact that he got a letter about the cars and needing to claim them officially, and he didn't do that. Combined with the condition they were in, there was no other explanation aside from the fact that they were abandoned and just unusable cars. We had the right to get rid of them, and he seemed angry and started yelling at us that we destroyed some really good cars. My husband just could not resist himself. Husband, actually we only destroyed 2 of them, the other we sold for $10K. The old neighbor started ranting and going crazy that it should be his money and the court had to force us to give it to him. But well, it was our property and when it was sold and he wasn't entitled to anything. The judge even told him that if he cared about his property, he should have taken better care of it. We walked out of court feeling like $1 million, while the neighbor was still pissed off that we stole his cars. If he knew what that one was worth, he should have never left it and instead left another worthless one, but I think he just did this on purpose. He wanted us to scrap a valuable car without going through the process in order to sue us and get a ton of money as his last act of revenge against us. He did not count on us being smarter than that and not blindly jumping into things without making sure that we were doing things right. I know in some places towing is easier and we could have gotten rid of the cars on day one, no matter what. I really recommend looking into what the cars are, because something might look like a mess but actually be worth something to people. Old neighbor tried to contact us a few more times about the money, but the threat of calling the police was enough to make him back off and retreat. I don't know what we are gonna do with our free money yet, so I'm open to any and all suggestions down in the comments. And if he continues to try and contact us, I'll be getting a restraining order. We dealt with his crap for years, but at least we managed to get a nice sum of money at the end of the day because of it. I can imagine him going around to all his other cars and trying to hard sell another good one to just try and make up for the huge loss that he managed, all because he wanted to get revenge against us. Revenge for honestly I don't know what, because he was the one always causing problems with us. I can only pray that the new neighbors are gonna be easier to get along with. The next one is titled, "Am I the a-hole for continuing to change in front of my window even after my neighbor complained?" And by the way, if you have watched until here and enjoy the neighbor stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, since that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. I, early 30s female, bought a house last year with my fiancé, but we only just moved in a few months ago because it needed some work. Our neighbors are a woman, her husband, and their college-aged son. Everything was fine until a few weeks ago, when the neighbor woman came over visibly upset and told me that she saw me changing through my window and would appreciate it if I didn't do that there. I was surprised because the angle of the window makes it so that someone would really have to go out of their way to see anything. I checked it out myself, and unless you're standing in a very specific spot in their yard, you cannot see much at all. And to be clear, no one in her family, husband or son, has ever mentioned seeing me. She was just worried that they might. I didn't feel like I should have to change my habits for her, especially since they would have to be actively trying to look in. So then I kept changing there as I had been, but well, she came over again last week, this time freaking out at my fiancé, calling me an W-H-O-R-E and accusing me of being disrespectful. I honestly think it's ridiculous because I'm in my own home and I'm not flaunting myself. Her husband came over and apologized and said that he asked her specifically not to do that, and clarified that he had never mentioned seeing me nor had his son. My fiancé told me to just get new blinds or try to change in a different area, but I think that's BS and have been doing as I've since moved in. And then a user in the comments said, "In the United States, nudity is generally illegal on a person's own property if the nude person is visible to the public, such as through an open window or sunbathing naked in the yard. Just to be safe, you might want to check your state and local laws and make sure you're in the clear." And by the way, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, what is your take on this? Do you think OP is actually in the wrong here or not? Let me know in the comments. Another comment said, "Why don't you just not change clothes in front of a window? I had a naked neighbor with no blinds that would sit naked on her couch. When told of the issue, the husband of the woman told people just not to look. It was just so weird that she knew, but still sat naked on the couch. So you know that someone saw you change in front of your non-curtained window, and yet you defiantly still change in front of this window. You are the weird naked neighbor. You are the a-hole." And the next one is titled, "Entitled neighbor demands we extend our wall and threatens to report us to the city." So this is so stupid. I've lived in this house with my grandparents for about 6 years. When we moved in, we had this awful wooden retaining wall facing the neighbor's property. Her property is downhill from ours, so the retaining wall keeps our yard from washing away into hers. We found out last year that the wall was rotting and needed to be replaced, so we recently had it replaced with these beautiful retaining stones. We also extended the wall past where the previous wall had been. We cannot take it all the way to the street because of the city's guidelines, but it goes far enough. It could be extended by maybe 3 feet, but we couldn't afford to go any further. Well, the neighbor, who we had gotten along with until now, did not like it. She complained to us that our wall was not long enough and her yard was gonna wash away, and she already had rivers running through her yard. We live on a street with no sidewalks, so everyone has ditches for drainage. She never cleans hers despite having huge trees dropping sticks and leaves into it, so her yard floods when it rains. She is blaming us for that. She then said that she could pay for them, the landscapers to extend the wall and then showed my grandma some brown retaining stones she said she could get to finish the wall. Our wall is grey, so of course grandma said no, and the neighbor said that she could not deal with it and did not want to be a bitch and would report us to the city if she had to. My grandma said, go ahead, and walked away. What makes her think that she has any right to mess with our wall? Our landscapers even removed a stump from her property for her for free. She asked them if they could and she never even thanked them. As far as we know, she either has not reported us to the city or the city told her to pound sand. She has tried to make conversation with me, but I won't talk to her. I have too much to worry about without having her trying to manipulate me into talking to my grandma. Some clarification? Her yard has been damaged like that since before we moved in. She told us as much, so it wasn't caused by our new wall. The new wall was put in by professionals, so it has a proper drainage system installed. None of the damage she pointed out could have been caused by our new wall. We know this because it hadn't rained in the days between the wall being finished and her complaining, so there was no storm water for our wall to let into her yard. Also, the damage was on the other side of the yard, so it wasn't caused by the installation itself. She never told us about the water damage in her yard until she was demanding that we extend our wall. If she had, we probably would have put a new one in sooner. The landscapers did get her permission to go onto her property to build the wall, and the wall is not on her property, but in order to put everything in properly, they had to use her yard. She was fine with it as long as they fixed her yard when they were done, which they did. She confirmed that it looked great, we got all the proper permits and everything, so there's really nothing she can do at this point. And the next one is a petty revenge story. So this is another round we had with Clara, my dad's girlfriend, years ago. I wrote another story before, and to clarify, yes, she is awful, and yes, my dad was dumb to have her, but he had his issues. Me and my dad lived in different houses but the same property, so we had keys for each other's houses in case of emergency. My dad loved road trips, and when he was given money bonus at work, he planned the road trip and asked Clara to come with him. To celebrate the bonus and the trip, they planned to eat a concimento, which consists of boiling seafood, shrimps, clams, mussels and meats, chicken and pig, and some other things in white wine. So they took Clara's car and went to buy the things. That day I went out to spend a 3-day summer weekend in a friend's house, so I closed my house and then left. When I came back from my friend's house and opened the door, a stench smacked my nose. It came from the kitchen. I was sure that I left no garbage there, but when I looked at the can, there was a lot of seafood shells and other things stinking up everything. My first thought was Clara. I phoned Dad to ask him how was his trip, and he said that it was awesome and he would be returning in 4 days. I asked if he entered my house before leaving, and he said he hadn't. So then I took pictures of the stinking mess to be shown later. I spent a lovely evening cleaning and de-stinking my place and thought of something when I saw Clara's car in the yard. I entered Dad's house and saw Clara's car keys, so I went to the market and bought some of the same seafood I found in my garbage and proceeded to spread it in Clara's car. Some clams under the seats, some mussels in the trunk, some shrimps in the vents of the air conditioner of the car. Everything was left in a closed car under the sun for 3 summer days. A lovely 4-wheeled oven. When Dad and Clara came back and she opened her car, I just heard the screams of Clara blaming me for that. So I went straight to Dad, showed the pictures I had taken of what Clara left in my house, and then started laughing. Clara looked at Dad and he said to Clara, "You both are adults and you started this." To my delight, my dad told me that it was only after she cleaned the car insides that she turned on the air conditioner of the car and felt the wonderful smell of those hidden shrimp. Edit, I'll explain something that seems to be misunderstood. Dad and I lived in different houses in the same property. We were like across the street neighbors, but separated by a big yard. We had a big container for garbage in the yard. What Clara did was enter my house and leave the seafood leftovers in my kitchen's small garbage can. 3 days passed and that became a smelly mess. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. In 2018, I lived in Southern California while I was finishing up graduate school. Uber was more popular than ever, and given how spread out California is in general, it was an easy side hustle to shuttle people back and forth. However, I only did it for a little while because I'm not really the most patient person and eventually got tired of people's BS and attitudes. One of the common tactics for customers looking to screw a driver over was to cancel their rides in the middle of the trip to avoid paying the fare. They would often say how they did it accidentally and then ask me if I could just finish the trip since we were basically there anyway. This happened to me 3 times. The first 2 times I pulled over and told them to get out of my car, to which they complied. Albeit they called me several names and threatened to kill me. The third time is the subject of this post. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when I decided to log on and catch some fares. Most people go into the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays and are looking to get rides home between 4 to 5 p.m. to beat the traffic. At this point, I should mention that I was living in San Diego. If you know the area, you would know that many people work in the city and live in the outer areas, because it is just cheaper. The day of the event, oh yes, it was an event, I picked up a middle-aged girl who was a student at the local community college downtown. Although she was in community college, I could tell she had money by the way she dressed and where she was going, La Jolla. She gets in my car and starts to make a conversation with me. I'm driving through town, and as I'm about to get on the highway, I hear the cancellation ding. I pull over to a parking lot and let her know that she cancelled the ride and I could not drive her until she rebooked it. She gave me the "it was an accident" excuse. I told her not a problem and just rebooked the route. Well, at this point, all those people I told you about earlier had just gotten off work and we were in what I call the power hour of maximum surge pricing. La Jolla is 25 to 40 minutes away from downtown San Diego, depending on the traffic. I looked and the trip would have cost her $70. She told me that she wasn't gonna pay that. I said fine and I asked that she exits my vehicle. She refused and told me to take her home like I was her chauffeur. At this point I was pissed and wouldn't have done it even if she gave me $100 cash. I didn't really need the money. So I asked her politely again. She refused. I had never really gotten to this point before. The other two people were guys and I would have had no qualms about yanking their ass out by force and beating them in the middle of the highway. However, that wouldn't have been a good look in this situation. I thought about going to the police given that we were 3 blocks from the headquarters, but I wanted her to feel the burn. Cue my malicious compliance. I asked her if she wanted a free ride and she suddenly perked up and said, "I knew you would come around. You're such a nice guy." I said buckle up and we got on Interstate 5. Here's the part where I tell you that San Diego is 16 miles from the Mexican border. I also keep my passport in my glove compartment because I did volunteer in Rosarito every so often. We were about 4 minutes into the ride when she asked where we were going. I turned around and told her, "I'm going to Tijuana and I'm glad you could join me. I hope you brought your passport." At first she didn't think I was serious, but by exit 4 she started to panic. I told her she was welcome to get out at any time, but she needed to make a decision soon because after we passed exit 1 there was no turning back. I also told her that I wasn't taking her back and well, she got the message and pleaded for me to pull over. I pulled over and dropped her off at the outlet mall in San Ysidro at the border. Just for craps and giggles, I checked the Uber rate from the mall to La Jolla and the cheapest rate was $87 for a pool ride. I didn't make any money that night, but that was the richest experience I had while being a rideshare driver. I stopped about 1 month later and sold my car. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, props to OP, that was a brilliant revenge. Absolutely amazing. Either way, the next one is a coworker am I the jerk story. I know the title sounds bad, but hear me out. I, 28 male, have a female coworker, 26 female, who likes to flirt with all of the men at my work. My wife, 24 female, knows about her and how I feel. Coworker stays away from me unless it's work related because I shot her down a few times and told her on Monday if she didn't knock it off I would report her to HR. Well, yesterday that coworker found my wife's social media and messaged her telling her that I'm a creep and won't leave her alone and that I tried to pay her for sex. I was honestly disgusted by this. I ignore her existence unless it's work related and I couldn't believe the blatant lies she was telling. So today I go into work and have my phone in my hand and recorded our conversation when I confronted her. I did not show her face, the camera was facing the floor, so all that was shown was the shoes. After some back and forth, she admitted she was mad that I threatened HR and hoped my wife would force me to quit my job so I was not a problem anymore. So then I took the recording and the messages to HR and she was fired immediately. On the way out of the building, she screamed at me that I was an a-hole and a few other choice words for recording her without her permission and that she is suing me for it. Even a few coworkers said that I was wrong for it and I should have just showed HR the messages and how she is a single mom and I just cost her kids their livelihood. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? Edit, a lot of people seem very concerned about my age gap with my wife. Not that I owe anyone any explanation, but we met when my wife was 21, we got married after 2 months of dating because we hooked up and she wound up pregnant. I was in the military and stationed on the other side of the country and wanted an active involvement in my now daughter's life. If that makes me a bad person, so be it, I guess. So yeah, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Is OP the a-hole here or not? Someone on Reddit said, not the a-hole, if the genders were reversed, everyone would be applauding you. Always have proof and never go off, he said, she said when possible. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, I know there's a grey area here because in lots of places it's illegal to record without consent. However, she was out to get you and proved that she was willing to say whatever to get you out, and I'm glad you got the recording of her saying so. Comment number 3, she cost her own kids her livelihood, as if hitting on you wasn't bad enough, but contacting your wife and potentially ending your marriage is hard. That's a bridge too far. From your title I was gonna say something else, but definitely not the a-hole. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.